The animal kingdom is as majestic as it is merciless. No matter how rich, famous, or seemingly untouchable, no one is safe when nature strikes. In this video, we're diving into 5 of the most horrifying celebrity deaths caused by animals. Real stories where stardom offered no protection against the raw, unpredictable force of the wild. Today's story takes us back to San Francisco, California on a chilly afternoon, January 26, 2001. In the quiet, upscale neighborhood of Pacific Heights, everything seemed calm. But inside the hallways of a luxury apartment building, one of the most shocking tragedies in modern San Francisco history was about to unfold. The victim was Diane Whipple, a 33-year-old lacrosse star and coach. Diane was born in Princeton, New Jersey, and raised by her grandparents in New York. From an early age, she was a gifted athlete. She represented the U.S. twice at the Women's Lacrosse World Cup, and even came close to qualifying for the 1996 Olympics. By 2001, Diane was the head coach of the women's lacrosse team at St. Mary's College in Moraga. She lived with her longtime partner, Sharon Smith, and was loved by colleagues, students, and friends alike. That afternoon, Diane returned home from the grocery store, carrying her bags through the hallway toward her apartment. At the same time, her neighbors, attorneys Robert Knoll and Marjorie Knoller, were handling their 2 massive Presa Canario dogs, Bane and Hera. These weren't your average pets. They were enormous. Bane weighed around 140 pounds and Hera nearly 100. They'd been bred for fighting and had ties to Paul Cornfed Schneider, a violent Aryan Brotherhood gang member serving life in prison, whom Knoll and Knoller had strangely befriended and adopted. For months, residents in the building had complained that the dogs were dangerous. Some neighbors reported being bitten or threatened. A dog walker had even warned Knoller to use muzzles, but nothing changed. As Diane walked past, Bane suddenly lunged. What followed was terrifying. Witnesses later said they heard Diane's screams echo through the hallway as the huge dog attacked. The assault was brutal. She suffered 77 bite wounds to her arms, legs, and torso, with only her scalp and the soles of her feet untouched. Her throat was torn open. Neighbors tried desperately to pull the animal off, and emergency crews rushed Diane to the hospital, but it was too late. She died from massive blood loss. That same day, Bane was euthanized. Hera was seized and later put down as well. Public outrage exploded. These weren't stray animals. They were known threats, and their owners had been warned again and again. By March 2001, both Knoll and Knoller were charged. Knoller faced second-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter, while Knoll was charged with involuntary manslaughter. Both were also convicted of keeping a dangerous animal. The case was so high-profile, it had to be moved to Los Angeles. Knoller tried to claim she'd attempted to stop the attack, even suggesting that Diane's perfume might have triggered the dogs, a comment that only fueled public anger. In 2002, she was convicted of second-degree murder under implied malice, meaning she knew the risk her dogs posed but ignored it. After years of appeals, her conviction was upheld, and in 2008 she was sentenced to 15 years to life. Knoll served a 4-year sentence, was paroled in 2003, and died in 2018. Sharon Smith later filed a civil suit and won $1.5 million, donating part of it to St. Mary's lacrosse program. The case set a legal precedent, proving pet owners can face serious criminal charges if they knowingly put others in danger. For Diane Whipple, a life filled with achievement and mentorship ended just steps from her own front door. A horrifying and completely preventable tragedy. Next up is a tragedy that shocked Canada and left wildlife experts scrambling for answers. It was October 27, 2009, on Nova Scotia's Skyline Trail, a rugged 4.3-mile path winding through Cape Breton Highlands National Park. Hikers loved it for its sweeping views of the Gulf of St. Lawrence, especially in autumn when the cliffs glow with reds and golds. But that crisp afternoon, the trail became the setting for something almost without precedent. The victim was Taylor Mitchell, a 19-year-old folk singer from Toronto. Just months earlier, she'd released her debut album, For Your Consideration, earning glowing reviews for her poetic lyrics and warm, earthy voice. That summer, she'd wowed audiences at the Winnipeg Folk Festival, quickly becoming one of Canada's most promising young artists. Between shows on a short Nova Scotia tour, Taylor decided to spend her day off hiking the Skyline Trail, a chance to enjoy the natural world she wrote about so often in her songs. Around 3 p.m., fellow hikers saw her heading back toward the parking lot. Not long after, an American couple on the same path noticed 2 eastern coyotes. Their behavior was off. Instead of fleeing, the animals stood their ground, staring boldly at the pair before melting back into the brush. Moments later, desperate cries echoed from deeper in the woods. Taylor had been attacked, At least 2 coyotes had gone after her as she walked alone. Scattered across the trail were her keys, a small pocket knife, and torn clothing, chilling signs of a frantic struggle. Farther down, hikers found her gravely injured, bleeding heavily, with one of the coyotes still hovering nearby. They managed to drive the animal off long enough to call for help. Paramedics rushed Taylor to a hospital in Cheticamp. Then she was airlifted to Halifax's Queen Elizabeth II Health Sciences Center. Doctors worked tirelessly, but her wounds were catastrophic. That evening, she died from massive blood loss. She was just 19. Investigators later confirmed the unthinkable. This was the first recorded case of an adult killed by coyotes in Canada, and only the second fatal attack on an adult in all of North America. Typically, coyotes are shy and avoid people, so why had this happened? Some experts speculated the animals might have been fed by visitors, losing their fear of humans. Others pointed out that eastern coyotes in Cape Breton had begun hunting larger prey, like moose, and were developing bolder, more aggressive behavior. Authorities eventually captured 5 coyotes from the area. DNA testing showed at least 3 carried Taylor's blood, confirming their role in the attack. The Skyline Trail was temporarily closed while officials reassessed how to keep visitors safe in wild spaces. Taylor's death sent shockwaves through the music community and the wider public. She had just been nominated for a Canadian Folk Music Award as Young Performer of the Year. Her funeral in Owen Sound, Ontario, was filled with friends, family, and fans remembering a gifted artist whose songs championed kindness and respect for nature. Today, her memory lives on through the Taylor Mitchell Legacy Trust, which funds arts programs and wildlife education. But the haunting events of that day remain a sobering reminder. Even in the most beautiful places, wild animals demand our caution and our respect. Our next story takes us to the heart of Africa, where a peaceful safari turned into a scene of unimaginable tragedy. It was August 2001 in Kenya's Tsavo East National Park, a vast, sun-baked wilderness known for its elephants, lions, and sweeping savanna. Among the tourists exploring its beauty was Jacques Boxberger, one of France's most celebrated middle-distance runners. Born in 1949, Boxberger had risen to stardom as a teenager. At just 19, he shattered the world junior record in the 1,500 meters and competed in the 1968 Olympic Games in Mexico City, placing 6th in the final. Over the next 2 decades, he became a fixture in international athletics, running in 4 Olympics between 1968 and 1984. He twice won the Paris Marathon, took the Marrakesh Marathon in 1987, and collected multiple French national titles. Even a serious knee injury during military service couldn't dim his determination. By the time he retired, Boxberger was a legend, admired not just for his endurance, but for his passion for the sport. Away from the track, he was known as a devoted family man and an avid photographer. That summer, he traveled with his wife and daughter to Kenya, eager to capture the country's landscapes and wildlife through his camera lens. On an August afternoon near the Voi region of Tsavo East, the family stopped for a picnic. Always drawn to the perfect shot, Boxberger walked about 200 yards from the car to film a nearby elephant. The massive creature appeared calm as it grazed in the distance, and for a moment it must have seemed like the perfect opportunity. But elephants, despite their reputation for gentleness, can turn dangerously protective without warning, especially if they feel threatened or surprised. As Boxberger focused through his viewfinder, the elephant suddenly shifted its posture, then charged. Witnesses say it happened in seconds. The animal closed the distance, wrapped its trunk around Boxberger, and hurled him violently against a tree. The sound of the impact shattered the quiet plains. Before anyone could react, the elephant struck again, trampling him under its enormous weight. His wife and daughter watched in shock, powerless to intervene. Rangers and guides rushed to the scene, but it was too late. Boxberger died from his injuries at the age of 52. News of his death spread quickly to France, leaving the sports world stunned. Headlines called it a bitter irony. A man who had conquered Olympic tracks and grueling marathons, lost not to time or illness, but to the untamed strength of Africa's wildlife. In the years after, his daughter, Claire Boxberger, followed in his footsteps, becoming a middle-distance runner herself and honoring her father's athletic spirit. For fans and fellow athletes, his passing was more than a freak accident. It was a sobering reminder that even the most disciplined and accomplished among us are vulnerable when stepping into nature's domain. Jacques Boxberger's life, filled with records, victories, and personal devotion, ended far from the roar of stadium crowds. In its place was the thunder of an elephant's charge across the African savanna, a tragic testament to the raw power of the wild. Our next story takes us deep into the wilds of Alaska, a place where beauty and danger exist side by side. It was October 2003 in Katmai National Park, a sprawling, untamed expanse along Alaska's rugged coast. For more than a decade, Timothy Treadwell had made this wilderness his summer home, sharing the landscape with some of the largest grizzly bears in North America. To his supporters, Timothy was a passionate protector of wildlife, a man determined to build a bridge between humans and animals most people feared. To his critics, he was a thrill-seeker pushing the limits of common sense, daring fate one season too many. Treadwell wasn't always the rugged bear man. Born in 1957, he once dreamed of Hollywood fame, hoping to carve out a career as an actor. But after years of frustration and setbacks, he reinvented himself completely, adopting a new persona as a self-styled guardian of grizzlies. His boundless enthusiasm and almost childlike wonder made him a compelling figure. Schools invited him to speak, television crews followed him into the wild, and he even appeared on late-night talk shows. Alongside a friend, he co-founded Grizzly People, a nonprofit aimed at educating the public about bear conservation. With a video camera always in hand, he recorded nearly every moment of his life among the bears, creating an extraordinary archive of their world and his own. By the summer of 2003, Timothy wasn't alone. He was joined by his girlfriend, Amy Huguenard, a 37-year-old physician's assistant from Colorado. Amy admired Timothy's dedication, but never fully shared his comfort around the massive predators. She often felt uneasy in Katmai's remote corners, yet her affection and loyalty kept her by his side, even when the wilderness felt threatening. That fall, the pair set up camp at Kaflia Bay, a harsh and isolated area far from rangers or other visitors. It was late in the season, a dangerous period when bears become increasingly aggressive, competing for scarce food before hibernation. Typically, Timothy ended his expeditions by late September, but that year he chose to extend their stay, hoping to capture more footage of the animals he adored. On the evening of October 5th, disaster struck. A massive male grizzly, later identified as Bear 141, emerged from the shadows and lumbered into their campsite without warning. What followed was pure horror. Their video camera, left rolling with the lens cap still on, caught only the sounds. Timothy's panicked shouts, the bear's deep guttural roars, and Amy's terrified screams as she tried in vain to drive the animal away. The attack lasted only a few minutes, yet its outcome was devastating. When rangers finally reached the remote site, they discovered a grim tableau, the remains of both Timothy and Amy lying near their collapsed tent. A severed arm, still wearing Timothy's ticking wristwatch, was found nearby. Inside the stomach of Bear 141 were human remains and scraps of clothing, leaving no doubt about the violence that had unfolded. For safety, a younger bear seen lingering near the camp was also euthanized. News of the tragedy spread quickly, shocking the world. Katmai had gone 85 years without a single fatal bear attack. To some, Timothy's death felt inevitable, the tragic conclusion of a man who believed he could live as one with apex predators. To others, it was the ultimate price for an unwavering devotion to nature's raw beauty. 2 years later, director Werner Herzog released Grizzly Man, weaving Timothy's own footage into a haunting documentary that reignited debate. Was Treadwell a hero who sacrificed everything for the creatures he loved, or a reckless dreamer who put himself and Amy in mortal peril? Whatever your view, Timothy Treadwell's story stands as a stark reminder of the razor-thin line between awe and danger when humans walk unguarded into the wild. Our final story takes us to the crystal-clear waters off Queensland, Australia, a place where adventure and beauty often meet. It was September 4th, 2006, at Bat Reef near Port Douglas. The turquoise expanse of the Great Barrier Reef shimmered beneath a perfect blue sky. For Steve Irwin, the beloved crocodile hunter, it was supposed to be just another day of filming. At 44, Irwin had built a worldwide reputation as a fearless wildlife conservationist. With his khaki shorts, infectious grin, and endless enthusiasm, he turned animal documentaries into thrilling, family-friendly television, inspiring millions to respect and protect nature. That morning, Steve and his crew were working on a project called Ocean's Deadliest. Unlike his usual heart-pounding encounters with crocodiles or venomous snakes, this shoot was meant to be relatively calm, showcasing the reef's colorful marine life. But when rough weather diverted their plans, the team headed to Bat Reef, an area teeming with rays, fish, and coral. There, Steve spotted a massive stingray gliding across the sandy bottom and decided to get a close-up for the cameras. Stingrays are typically shy and rarely attack humans, so the moment seemed like a safe way to capture more footage. With cameraman Justin Lyons filming, Steve floated just above the 7-foot ray. At first, everything appeared peaceful. Then, in an instant, that calm dissolved into chaos. The stingray whipped its muscular tail upward, driving its sharp barb into Steve's chest again and again. A rapid, defensive reflex triggered when the animal felt cornered. One strike pierced directly into his heart. Lyons later described the attack as a blur of motion, like hundreds of strikes in seconds. Steve, who had faced down some of the planet's fiercest predators, was gravely wounded by a creature few would consider dangerous. The crew pulled him from the water and rushed him back toward their boat, desperately performing CPR. But the damage was catastrophic. Steve's final words, as remembered by Lyons, were heartbreakingly simple. "I'm dying." Within minutes, the man who had made the world fall in love with crocodiles, snakes, and sharks was gone. News of his death spread across the globe within hours, leaving fans stunned. For many, it felt unthinkable. Steve Irwin, who had handled man-eating reptiles and wrestled massive crocodiles, felled by a normally docile stingray? Tributes poured in from every corner of the world. Politicians, celebrities, and millions of ordinary people mourned the loss of a man who blended daring adventure with a deep love for animals. A memorial service at the Australia Zoo, attended by thousands and broadcast to millions, celebrated Steve as more than an entertainer. He was remembered as an educator, a conservationist, and a champion of wildlife whose enthusiasm inspired a generation to care about the natural world. In the years since, his family has carried that torch. Terry, Bindi, and Robert Irwin have expanded the zoo into a major hub for conservation, continuing the mission Steve started. Through documentaries, wildlife rescues, and education programs, they ensure his voice and vision live on. For Steve Irwin, the Great Barrier Reef was meant to be another backdrop for storytelling, a chance to share the magic of the ocean with his audience. Instead, it became the setting for one of television's most heartbreaking losses, a stark reminder that even the most experienced adventurers are not immune to nature's unpredictability. Steve's legacy, however, remains unsinkable, a bold, joyful call to protect the wild places and creatures that make our world extraordinary.